Hello, it's me. It's the latest episode of Built from Scratch. It's the 22nd of September and I've got a stinking cold and I hardly got any sleep last night. So if my voice sounds a bit weird, that's why. What did I do yesterday? So I started the day by researching Shopify's use of canonical and hreflang tags. That was going to be my final bit of research before I actually implement hreflang on my own site. And it was interesting to look at what they were doing. I came to the conclusion that I think they're actually doing canonical tags wrong. But their hreflang tags all made sense, and it looks fairly simple. I mean, what it boils down to is for every language or region based duplicate page, you need a tag on the originating page and the duplicate page. And on the originating page it's going to say, if you want to read this in the area or language that this page is written in, then this is the page to read it. If you want to read it in this other language, or if you're in this other region, then this is a link to that other page and that's where you should read it. And then on the duplicate page you have the exact same links. But in this case it will be the one that's relevant for that duplicate page, so the one for Germany or France or whatever that says this is where you want to read the German or French content, and then you will have a link back to the originating page saying if you want to read it in whatever language or region that is, that's the page to read. And if you have more pages and it becomes more complicated, if it becomes bigger, it doesn't actually get more complicated. It just means on every single page you're going to have 10 links saying this is the page to read if you want it in this area or language, and then 9 going out to the other different areas saying this is the page to read for those areas, and on each one of those other pages you're going to have 10 links all saying, again, the same thing. So it's actually fairly straightforward. I think the reason I thought they were doing their canonical tags wrong is because on every single one of their pages they have a self-referencing canonical tag. In other words, it says this is the most important version of this content, which obviously can't be the case. A canonical tag can only be correctly applied, as far as I'm aware, to one version of a piece of content. Otherwise, what's the point? The whole idea of canon is that this is the place to look. So I think they've sort of tried to cover all the bases there, and in so doing have given Google a kind of meaningless instruction. So I suspect Google are ignoring those tags. So that was, like I say, the final bit of research into that. It was then just a case of actually getting on with it. However, I did a few other bits and pieces first. I had a quick check on Spotify just to see if the Built from Scratch podcast has appeared there, and it is. Plus, whilst I was doing my daily check of emails, I got an email saying it's live on Amazon Music now, so that's good. I had a quick look in iTunes as well, just to see those changes that I spoke about yesterday that I made to the titles of the existing pieces of content to turn them into sort of natural language titles. I wanted to see if that had fed through to iTunes, and it has. So that was nice to see as well. I don't know how frequently that updates, but it certainly noticed those changes. So then the next thing was that I then made... is that the right order? Well, forget that. Basically, in yesterday's video, I was talking about the idea of doing side piece video content, and that was all explained yesterday if you wanted to have a listen to that. So I then went on to prepare to do the first side piece video, and I spent some time finding a suitable title, and once I'd found a title that I was going to talk about, I realised that I would have to be fairly on top of what I was going to say to put something together which would answer the query being asked in the title in a kind of competent, reasonably sharp way. I had a little bit of a think about how much effort it would take to get to the point where I could comfortably sit in front of a camera and deliver that kind of content, and came to the conclusion that whilst it wouldn't take ages, it was going to require probably a little bit of extra research and certainly a bit of note preparation, in a way that I don't do for these built from scratch videos. I have got some notes in front of me today. Every day I write down notes about what I'm doing as I go along, and that they are the notes that I then use the next day for making these videos, but they are rough, unedited, and consequently that's why the way that I talk in these videos is often a little bit stilted, because I'm trying to figure out what I've written as I go along and having memories of what I did yesterday and just put it all together in a fairly rough way like that. And that's fine for this set of videos, but it wasn't going to be okay for ones where I'm trying to do a slightly smoother job of answering a specific query or question. So having considered it, I actually decided to drop the whole idea, which is annoying. You know, having spent a fair bit of time yesterday considering it and talking about it, it feels like an annoying waste of time to then just drop it, but it's the right decision, I think. The fact is, I'm not doing any of this video or podcast content to try and build an audience or to make money directly off it, either on YouTube or podcast adverts or the ways that you can make money directly from making this sort of content. The only reason I'm doing it is to have something link worthy on the site. So in the end, the only actual change I'm making is that I'm going to keep using natural language titles on the built from scratch videos, or possibly I might do a quick bit of research based on the main thing that I'm talking about, and if there is a suitable phrase, so to have any chance of it being a genuinely suitable phrase for what I'm going to talk about without having to change what I'm going to talk about to fit it, it's going to be some kind of super crazy long tail phrase that might just have a search volume of like a few a month, and in fairness, I suspect it might be a struggle to even find a really long tail phrase that fits. I think I'm going to end up just doing pure natural language titles off the top of my head. And I'm just going to have to deal with the lack of traffic, which should be easy to deal with. It's not important. It just seems like a shame, basically, to put this much effort into producing content and then not optimise it in such a way to get it in front of people. But there you go. It's the correct decision, so that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, so I've then written a note to myself about that scenario, the fact that I spent time considering it, talking about it, writing about it, and then took a first tiny initial step towards actually doing it, and immediately realised I didn't want to do it. It was going to take too much time. I really could do with getting better at putting together a minimum viable product and then iterating, rather than trying to plan a grand scheme all up front, because doing it the former way means that you will test something out, and if it turns out it's got some kind of major flaw, you'll recognise it much sooner, and then you can drop the idea or iterate and change and make it better. the way I do things, it does lend itself to wasting time, because you've invested so much by the time you actually take a first stab at something and then realise it's no good. Having said that, after I made the decision to not do side pieces, I immediately spent some time rewriting the various notes and guides I've written for myself about doing side piece content. So the truth is, I'm only human. I guess moving fast and breaking things is not my forte. I'm going to try and be better at that, but I am who I am. So I guess at the end of the day, it's kind of a balance between the two things, of how you enjoy doing things and how you do them naturally, and what is best practice. Obviously, there are some aspects of life and work where the best way of doing things and your natural way of doing things just happen to collide, and that's great. But where they don't, just try and find that balance. So I then actually got stuck into hreflang implementation, finally. I used a tool from a website that I forget the name of now to write the code. To be honest, it was kind of just for the fun of it, because the code itself is really very simple. It's basically just hyperlinks with a little bit of markup around them. And given that you can copy it from another site, it wouldn't have been difficult to make them from scratch. However, I use this tool. It's just going to be, I've just done it for 2 pages so far, for a .co.uk. What did I just say? Did I get that wrong? A .co.uk and a .site. So that's my CCTLD for the UK and the generic TLD for kind of the rest of the world / America. The one final decision I need to make, which I think I might make after I've fully implemented it, is whether I'm going to have a on the .site, so the generic TLD. I don't know whether it's worth having a what do you call it? It's not a subdomain, like a subfolder for the US. So that would mean there would be 2 language region versions on the same domain, one specifically aimed at the US, and then a rest of the world section, still written in English but just not geographically targeted, using hreflang at the US. I think the decision I made yesterday, or at least the direction I was going in, which was in fact based on what I saw on Spotify, was to not do that, because there is no CCTLD aimed at the US. So unlike in every other country, if you just have a generic TLD that you want to rank in the States, you're not struggling to compete with a US CCTLD. And in Shopify's case, they therefore don't have a US hreflang target. So I think I'm going to do the same. So I think my hreflang setup is literally just going to be 2 links. One to a .site, which is going to be for the US and the rest of the English speaking world, or anyone else for that matter, and then the .co.uk. So as far as I can see, the code that I've got to input to my pages is therefore correct and how I want it to be. I've written that there were a couple of issues, which I'm going to have to just remind myself what they were now. So I assumed there'd be a way of just adding the code directly into the head section of each page, but it seems that there isn't. In WordPress, this is one of the quirks of WordPress. Unless you're happy to add the same thing to every page, which I've put that because I know I've previously used a plugin to add Google Analytics tracking code into the head section of the pages of the site. It's a simple plugin called Insert Headers and Footers, that works well, but anything you put in the header of that plugin, it gets applied to the head section of every page on the site, and it's the same thing that you're inputting to every page, which won't work for this because part of the hreflang tag, every time you use it, is the URL that you are telling Google is the correct URL for the variant of that piece of content, or well, the content that is on that page. So in other words, it needs to be different for every single page. So I've said that this method involves adding instructions. What method? Bear with me for a second. So I think I'm talking about the method that I then started using, which is to use what they call an element of the generate press theme that I'm using. And I've said about that it involves adding instructions to an element which isn't part of the actual code of the page. So I guess it has to be checked every time a page is loaded. And therefore there's a problem, potentially, which is that if you end up with thousands of articles, presumably that means that it has to check through all of those pages with each page load, which could pose a problem for site speed. Sorry, I'm aware I've not explained that very well. Can I explain it a bit better? Basically, with this element thing, with this part of the theme working in the way that it does, there is the source code of the page, which the browser loads when someone asks to go to that page. And that source code doesn't contain this head section with the hreflang tags in it. They are put in at the last second by this element section of the theme, and therefore it must be correct that the browser checks in that element area to find what it needs to download and add into that page load, which means it must therefore be checking through everything in that element every time. Sorry, I think that's a slightly better explanation. So obviously computers do things very quickly. I can imagine it could read through quite a lot of lines of code in a millisecond, and it wouldn't cause any kind of issues. But all I'm thinking is, what if this site ends up becoming massive and it's having to check through thousands of entries? Maybe that could be a problem, but maybe not. And then I've put issue number 2. I wanted to comment the tags so I know they were what I'd added, rather than something that the author of the theme, for example, had added. But I couldn't get the comments to appear. What this is about is, in I think any kind of coding language, certainly in HTML and CSS, you can write inside the code comments which are just for human use. So you might use them to guide yourself or another person in the future as to why you wrote a part of the code. And you just have to write them in a particular way, which makes the computer that's reading that code know that this is not actually part of the code it wants to execute. This is just something to ignore because only a human wants to read it. So I'm talking about putting some comments like that into the code just so that I know these are the hreflang tags. So I spent some time messing around with this because I was inserting comments and then checking the source code of the relevant page, and for some reason the comments weren't appearing. I found a kind of weird workaround but I wanted to figure out what was actually going on. So I both messaged the theme support team and also posted my first ever question on Stack Overflow, which, if you don't know it, is a website that it's like a community forum where you can post questions about coding and related things and generally get some very good answers back. It's a great resource for figuring out how to do specific little computer coding tasks. So that was fun, putting a question on there. It's kind of heavily moderated, actually mostly by the users of the site itself. Being programmers, they're all a pedantic, geeky lot, and so they very much enjoy telling people if they've phrased a question incorrectly or if they haven't given enough evidence or stuff like that, and therefore it ends up being really well moderated and the content on there tends to be really good. However, the one little job I've done this morning before making this video is to check what's going on there, and for reasons that I cannot understand, the comments that I wasn't seeing yesterday are being seen by the people who I'm asking for help. So essentially I've had a ticket back from the wordpress support team saying politely, what on earth are you going on about? We can see those comments. So I don't know what that was all about. It wasn't a caching thing. I'd turned off the cache at the WordPress end of things, and I'd cleared the browser cache. I don't know why I wasn't seeing those comments, but it seems to be working now, so that's fine. So I'm just trying to think, with regards to those issues, bearing in mind that is no longer an issue, I'm going to just put them aside, because the only other one is this method of implementing the hreflang tags going to end up causing some site speed issues. Well, if it does, it's going to be a long way in the future, I think, and I suspect it might not anyway. So I'm just going to use this method that I've found for inputting the code, and if it ever becomes an issue, it will be in the future when this is actually making some money and I've therefore got some money to pay someone who really knows what they're doing to get it sorted. Which, it wouldn't surprise me if that means a completely different technical implementation of it, which is fine as long as it works for now. So then the final thing yesterday was to start the process of migrating the content that is the site is currently comprised of, which is currently sitting just purely on the .co.uk site, migrating that to the .site site, which is of course a necessary precursor to actually fully implementing hreflangs, since they are reciprocal links between two or more sites. You need two sites minimum to actually make it work, and so I've got to put that second site up now. I paid for, or rather I already use a plugin called Updraft Plus, the free version of that, to do site backups. They have a paid add-on for site migration, and I've used it once before actually. I can't remember what for now, but I just know that I've used it, and I remember thinking it worked well and was not too difficult to use. And for a one-off use, it's only £24, so $30. So I paid for that again yesterday and just took the first few steps of the process. So I think once I finish this video and get back to it, I'm probably only about 10-15 minutes away from having the second site up, and then I can just stick that hreflang code in and that whole thing will be done. So hopefully when I'm talking tomorrow, it will be to confirm that that's all finished, and then I'll be moving on. Okay, that's the end of that one. See you later.